Hey, what's up guys? Pat here, back with another deck profile for you guys. Last couple of days obviously been pretty crazy with all the drama and everything that was going on in the community, so trying to get back to form by, going over a new deck list that is actually a revisit of an older deck from set 3. I think is still really strong in this format, and I don't see a lot of people playing. It's also something that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone for those of you who've been watching my stuff for a while. I like to play things that are mid-range or control, slower style decks. I don't like to play super aggressive decks that much if I can help it, but this format aggro is quite powerful, and Masked Saiyan is also incredibly powerful against a lot of decks, especially things like Hirudegarn. I find that he pressures Hirudegarn and does very well against him. And he has some new tricks this set that I don't feel like people are really talking too much about. I mean, I posted it in the previous video, or one of the previous videos, about cards that people are overlooking in this format. Masked Saiyan as a leader, I feel like is largely overlooked, and I do feel like in a field filled with things like SS3 and Trunks and U7 Gohan and whatnot, he does have a place. You might have to change your perceptions on how he's played. His playstyle is just a little bit different. You have to be a little bit more reserved, not suicidal aggro like he's known for. But between that and some of the new tricks he picked up this set, he definitely has a place, I feel like. So with that said, let's get into the deck list. First up, 4 super combos. You're obviously going to play it. It's the only super combo Masked Saiyan can play, so of course we're going to play it. 4 times choice Supreme Kai of Time. In a leader where you basically are milling 3 random cards every time you're trying to swing with Masked Saiyan, the ability to look at the top 3 instead of just 2 cards with Time Patrol Trunks is really, really nice. It lets you find the key pieces. I'm sure you noticed looking around this deck list, there's a couple of 2 and 3 ofs in the deck, so having the ability to fish those out for essentially just activating your leader ability once is great. It's good on turn 1, it's good on turn 5. It's always good, and you're never not happy to see this card. Next up is Dark Rejuvenator Toa, which is a card I feel like is largely overlooked and is one of the stronger cards in the set, especially for a deck like this. This deck has so many 2 or less cost attackers. Actually, it's pretty much just Trunks and Kaba, but that's good enough. The fact is, on turn 1 or 2, you can play your Kaba. If it still is somehow alive on your next turn, you can play this Dark Rejuvenator Toa and get massive value in the form of recouping extra cards out of your life to help you awaken, fill your hand for more combo potential, and then it itself comes down early and is cheap enough that it can pressure at the beginning of the game and actually steal some damage. It's only here at a 2-0 because it's only really good on, say, turn 2 or so, and then like to try and steal the game at the very end. So it's not something you want to play a 4 of, but it can steal games or put your opponent in a position that they otherwise were not expecting to be in. Say they thought they might be going from 5 to 4 life, you could put them in a situation where they could end up going from 5 to 3 life, or they thought they might be safe for the rest of the turn by comboing out, say something like a Raging Spirit Sun Gohan. They tap out, think that you're done, and then you overwhelm this Toa. And then somehow it's like, okay, now I have to block 2 more attacks as opposed to potentially 1 more from, say, something like Time Choice Supreme Kai. So really good. Trunks, Power Overseeing Time. It gets back our Champas. It gets back our super combos. It is a double striker. It's also important to note with other cards in the deck, which we'll get to in 2 card slots, it's just a very powerful target for that card. Mira, this has just been a standard and aggressive deck since the days of Vegeta. It's just an easy to fulfill overwhelm critical 20k body that has great synergy with Furthering Destruction Champa, so of course we're going to play. Dark Plot. There are not enough people playing Dark Plot in Masked Saiyan. This card's nuts. It costs 4, but in this deck, once you get to the 4 necessary energy, you're going to untap 3 every time. So this is essentially a 1 cost to pick an overwhelm card out of your warp, which is incredibly potent with cards like Trunks Power Overseeing Time, as well as the Bardock, which we'll be talking about next. Just the fact it stays on board, so that's really important. The ability to play Trunks Power Overseeing Time, pick something up, and then once it goes away, Dark Plot it next turn to keep the Trunks Power Overseeing Time in play permanently as a 20k double striker gives the deck a lot of needed reach. You're not going to close the game out in 3 turns against a lot of players, so I find that most Masked Saiyan players are not playing cards that give them reach outside of, say, like this miraculous comeback Ultimate Gohan, which we'll talk about later on. I feel like that's the only card people play that gives them reach. Dark Plot is a very cheap card that gives you a lot of reach over the course of the game if you can't close it out in the first 3 turns. So going forward, I really feel like this should be at least a 2 of in most Masked Saiyan decks. You don't want to see it early, but you know, it's a godsend late game. Every time you draw these later on in the game, they're basically going to just be 1-cost 20k double strikers. You should be playing this card. Desperate Onslaught Bardock. It's just another crit body that's very difficult to block, has great synergy with FDC, and it's a great evolve target for Super Saiyan 3 Bardock Power Unleashed. Originally I was playing 4 Desperates and 3 SS3 Bardocks when I originally was playing around with this list, but I always feel like having 4 and 3 of these might be a little bit too much, and it might just sit in your hand dead. So I've opted to cut one of these down to go to the 3-2 split just to add 2 Miraculous, just because it does have such good synergy with the leader, because your hand is usually pretty low. But you know, in general, the point still stands. You want to be playing Bardock because he's very good, like Mira is. He's cheap, he's got crit, he's very difficult to block, has great synergy with FDC, and then obviously he evolves into this Bardock. Bardock is great against apes. He's always been great against apes. He was a good sideboard option because of that. The thing is, now since Rob Russo won the ARG Boston event, you know, now more people are going to try and be playing these slower decks, things like with Bergamo, things like, you know, the blue-green Hirudegarn decks that are playing things like Analaza and Kami's Power Piccolo. Those cards will bury you if they stay on board for too long. So having the ability to play this card to, you know, finish up any loose ends in the game is great. You should feel no shame in tapping out for this card if it either A, wins you the game, or B, puts your opponent in a really awful spot. And you should definitely not feel bad tapping out for it if your opponent is trying to do the old strategy of beating Masked Saiyan, which is not attacking your life and leaving you at high life until you deck out. That's not really a viable strategy anymore, as we'll see when we get to the red cards. So, yeah, very, very, very strong card. You should be playing it, I feel like, main board if you're playing Masked Saiyan. 2 Scientist Fu, big beater, draws us cards. This card's like appears in most of my list. He's arguably the most useful overwhelm card for a variety of decks for, you know, for very good reason. You guys should be playing this either main or side in almost every one of your lists, it feels like. I mean, you can change this if you want, by the way, with Divine Vanquisher Fu or Divine Vanisher, whatever the 5-cost one is that banishes a guy. I think it's Divine Vanisher Fu. There we go. That's the card I'm thinking. You can play that over Scientist Fu if you like. I don't feel like you need it because you have Bardock and some other cards in here. But, you know, feel free to swap this out for that one if you are a fan of removal, and things like Bergamo are, you know, very prevalent in your meta. Saiyan Kaba, it's always been in the deck. Just great aggressive 1-drop, helps you awaken, double strike. Great synergy with this Toa here in the list. Next up is Intensifying Power Trunks. Again, lends to your strategy of self-awakening and just, you know, aggressing on your opponent. And having critical is obviously better than double strike in most scenarios. So yeah, but you're still going to play both because they're the best 1-drop aggressive things you can play in red. Just great cards. FDC ties most of the deck together. Giving something double strike out of nowhere is very punishing. Has amazing synergy with your leader because, you know, turn 1 getting 15k power and crit plus FDC makes it a 25k double strike crit, which is very punishing to an opponent on the first turn of the game. It's very hard to block for any leader, even SS3. So yeah, just one of the strongest, if not the strongest card in the entire deck because of how much damage it can just sneak through out of nowhere, and your opponent just always has to be aware that it's there. Digging Deep Vegeta. This is arguably the best card that Masked Saiyan got in this set. It costs a single red and anything, 2 of anything, so very easy on the energy cost. If you end up just, you know, having a bunch of black energy, that's fine. You only really need 1 red energy in this deck to operate well, unless you really are trying to cast this Topo. Yeah, just excellent card, especially on turn 3. When you swing with it, you could take up to 2 life. In that case, you restand this guy and he becomes a 20k. Very important to note, you don't have to snap take 2. You can just take 1. You can play the long game with this card and use it to just get multiple 20k attacks in every turn. I actually like the idea of, attacking, taking one, hitting them for 20, restanding and not using it, so they have to waste hard removal on it. And now they know that you're going to for sure awaken, and they're going to basically have to aggress on you and play the aggressive game against you, where it's going to be, just slugging it out, going to face, and usually Masked Saiyan wins in that exchange. And if they're not willing to play that, then you just, have this reminder here in Vegeta that, hey, I'm just going to punch you in the face every single turn and slowly work my way towards awakening, and you're just going to have to deal with it. Even if you just, you do actually want to use the 2 attacks, 20k is difficult to block consistently turn after turn, and it can also be used as a pseudo board clear, because you can attack something for 20, restand, and then go face. So it keeps the board clear, just excellent attacker, does everything you want, very aggressive card, gets us to awakening, which is Masked Saiyan's biggest problem. If this card's in your opening hand, you keep it, you snap keep it, it's amazing. Then we have 4 Unbreakable Gokus, standard card just like FDC. Obviously it doesn't give you the double strike, but it does give you much needed combo power without losing hand size, and it's just a great defensive card. It's just an amazing red card in general. It's cheap, it replaces itself, it gets the job done. 3 Topos, excellent negate. It's also an aggressive body if it somehow sticks around. I found that it's a little bit too cumbersome to play 4. I feel like 3 is just the right number that you want to be playing usually. You could even make a case for cutting this to 2. It has a place in the deck, but sometimes it's difficult to cast when you're trying to do things like play a Saiyan Kaba. Like, it's not that common for you to have like 3 or 4 red energy in a deck like this. Usually you're operating on 2 or less. And then finally we have the 2 Gohans that I mentioned earlier. They could be a 4th Bardock and a 3rd SS3 Bardock. I just felt that this card has insane synergy with the leader, just because it's just a cheap double strike beater, and I feel like it is dead less often than the SS3 Bardock, so it's just kind of there. So yeah, there you go. This is my take on a Masked Saiyan aggro deck. Somebody at my local asked me how I would take how I would build it if I was going to build it at all, and this is basically what it would end up looking like. I think this leader, like I said, is very strong. He's probably tier 1.5 in this current meta. Just really, really powerful. I really wish more people would play him, because I think he is still good. Everybody seems to be gravitating towards all the blue leaders, when I think that this leader, unless you're playing like a complete stall deck like Russo was playing, has a place. He can definitely beat these other, tries to kill you fast decks like the Hirudegarns and the Trunks. He's definitely fast enough to just counter punch them and kill them. And then he has enough tools now with this set to go long. Like I said, he, SS3 has a much better target now with this, this critical Bardock. And then, Vegeta also, and then Toa and Dark Plot. These cards are all cards that give you, tricks that you otherwise didn't have that help you out in the mid to late game. Alright guys, so this has been Masked Saiyan Aggro. I'll catch you guys in the next video.